Despite all the evidence now piling up that the process of natural gas drilling may, in fact, not just be causing methane to creep into the water supply in places like Colorado and Texas, as if that weren't bad enough, but now also may be causing earthquakes in Texas. Despite all of that evidence, the politics around it haven't seemed to change just yet. The Texas Railroad Commission, which for some reason regulates all drilling in Texas, I don't know why either, they are currently denying any link between wastewater disposal wells and earthquakes in Texas, telling the Fort Worth Weekly, quote, "Commission staff have no science or data at this time linking these minor seismic events to oil field activities." At this time, no science or data. At this time, times may be changing. Joining us now is Terrence Henry, former editor, writer, and web producer for The Washington Post and The Atlantic. Lately, he's been writing a lot about Texas fracking as energy and environment reporter for StateImpact Texas, which just published some great work about this. Terrence, it's nice to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Rachel.
So in terms of me explaining what's been happening in Texas and what we know about the science here, did I get anything wrong there? Did I leave anything important out?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. Like you said, there's been a huge spate of earthquakes recently, particularly in North Texas. The important distinction, I think, is that fracking isn't causing the earthquakes, but it's the disposal of wastewater from fracking. And what's happening is they have to essentially take this water, sand, and chemical mixture and put it in a giant underground dumpster. Some of these disposal wells are more than 13,000 feet deep. And when they're doing this, it's causing some faults to slip, and it's causing some of these small earthquakes in places, like you said, that have had no seismic activity really before this time.
Do they have to be dumping their wastewater 13,000 feet deep into the earth? Do they have other options for other ways they could handle this part of the drilling process?
Well, that could be something they'll start looking at some of these wells that have been blamed for the earthquakes. Not all of these disposal wells in this area of seismic activity have caused the quakes, but about 70 of them have. So one thing they could stop doing is stop injecting the wastewater down there. Another thing they could do is just put it in a different disposal well that's known not to cause quakes. There's a possibility of treating it, setting it back certain distances from seismic areas. So there are options to deal with it.
It does seem like, I mean, if this weren't serious, it would seem like an almost comic game of what could possibly go wrong. One of the rejoinders to the concern about this so far has been essentially that these earthquakes are small, that aside from some very minor damage, these have not been the kinds of earthquakes that should be thought of as disasters or that are causing any real harm to humans. Is there any assurance that the quakes will never be larger than they have been so far, now that there seems to be very strong correlation between this part of the drilling process and the quakes themselves?
Well, we talked to the U.S. Geological Survey about that, and they said there isn't any assurance that they won't, become more intense. Obviously, as you pointed out, and our reporting's covered, the frequency has definitely increased, and you are seeing quakes up to 3.5, 3.7 in areas that never had earthquakes before. So the open question is, well, right now it's resulting in some broken windows and cracked walls and foundations. But what about quakes that happen in areas where there are natural gas or oil pipelines that weren't built to specifications to withstand earthquakes?
That was going to be my last question. Because this area is not seen as this area is not seen as being earthquake prone. Infrastructure that's in these areas for all sorts of things, but particularly infrastructure around the oil and energy industries, it's not built to withstand quakes, is it?
I think that's a question that hopefully, the Railroad Commission and drillers themselves will look into. The thing to remember is that the quakes have been pretty small in size, and also the distance that the quake has gone has been pretty small. So far it's been very localized effects and minor damage, but certainly as drilling happens and closer and closer to people and their homes, and people start feeling earthquakes because of it, it's going to bring up these questions, and hopefully this is something that we can all look into.
Terrence Henry, energy and environment reporter for StateImpact Texas. Again, your work on this has been both more comprehensive than anybody else, but also really clear. So thank you for helping us cover this story. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.